Relationships only work when both people are willing to put in the work. It takes two for a relationship to thrive. Now, it only takes one person to steer it in a healthier direction. It only takes one person to change the dynamic away from toxic towards healthy. But it still takes that other person to respond and decide that they want to put in the work to give the relationship what it needs to thrive. And that's not to say that relationships always feel like work. In fact, the healthiest ones won't. But they would still admit that if you're not putting in the work consistently, then it's not going to work. It's not building trust. It's not growing closeness between both of you. It's not deepening your friendship or bond together. And the biggest problem? Everyone thinks they're already putting in the work, don't they? It's subjective. Ask anyone, 99% of people will say that for the most part, they're doing everything that they need to be doing. Or they will say, well, relationships shouldn't be work. You should just stop needing things, right, men? I mean, if you're the man, the problem is your wife is just too needy, right? She just complains too much. Or the problem is that your husband is emotionally or relationally inept, right? I mean, everyone thinks they're doing enough. And forgive me for being skeptical, but when pressed, most people can't even name the work that needs to be done mutually to make a relationship work. I mean, how else do you explain 50% of marriages failing? You think they just fell out of love? No, they failed because they never learned what work was required to succeed. Failure was the only destination to the paths that they were obliviously walking. And some of you are walking that path as well. That was me. Failure was the only option for me because I didn't know what a marriage needed to thrive, like intimacy and trust and empathy and mutual respect and healthy communication. I didn't know what love required of me, like selflessness and sacrifice and thoughtfulness and honesty and consideration, not perfectly, but consistently and intentionally. I didn't know that marriages require humility and brutal honesty about our own destructive habits that we need to stop, such as blaming or not apologizing or becoming defensive or dismissing her feelings or controlling her or manipulating him. A healthy marriage demands that we get rid of our demeaning words or our criticism or passive aggressiveness or silent treatments, to be honest about our unrealistic, unexpressed expectations, or coming to terms with our emotional avoidance and the way that we ignore vulnerability or closeness or empathy. None of that helps. It only hurts. And I didn't know that I wasn't putting in the work. And what I didn't know hurt my wife, and it hurt my marriage, and it will hurt yours too. You want to do the work? You think you're mature? You don't think you're blinded by arrogance or pride? Then prove it. Ask them the tough questions that only few couples seem to ask each other. Ask them, what work do you think is necessary from both spouses to have a successful marriage? And am I doing it? Because even though it's hard to hear, it doesn't matter if you think you're doing enough. If they don't think you're putting in the work, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. Your relationship is in trouble, because relationships don't thrive in environments where one person thinks that they are being chronically neglected or taken for granted. Does your spouse think that? If you care about your relationship more than your ego or your pride, you'll ask them. And this is not about having a tit-for-tat marriage where you only give if they're reciprocating. That's not what this is about. This is about understanding that if there isn't a certain level of reciprocation, the relationship suffers, doesn't it? And of course, sometimes someone is asking for too much. Sometimes someone is demanding or needs an unhealthy amount of reassurance or clinginess. And that absolutely needs to be discussed and explored with a professional. And other times, someone is emotionally lazy and they avoid vulnerability and closeness. And you're not asking for too much by saying that you need a certain level of that in your most intimate relationships. The point isn't to point the finger at them or try to change them or control them. The point is to realize what is healthy. The point is growing in self-awareness and emotional maturity. The point is being curious about whether or not you fully know your spouse, and if you're allowing them to fully know you. The point is having the courage to ask a professional to see your blind spots before you become a statistic in your divorce. Because healthy marriages can handle a complaint. Healthy marriages have a desire to know if something's bothering your spouse. And healthy marriages voice a concern or a hurt or a desire when it's appropriate. They don't avoid those conversations, they welcome them. And when you invite and encourage your spouse's feelings and hurts and desires, the complaints don't increase, they decrease and the connection increases. That's what this is about. So ask them, what's it like to be on the other side of me? Is there anything that you feel deprived of that maybe you haven't brought up? I'm not saying they have all the answers, I'm just saying you should know their answers. That's part of doing the necessary work. Ask them, how do you feel loved and prioritized and valued most? Ask them specific examples of what would make them feel neglected or taken for granted. Is it worth asking them if they feel like you reciprocate their efforts in this relationship? And if they don't, what are some specific ways that you could start with? Ask them what intimacy and closeness mean to them. You want to do the work in your marriage? Part of that is knowing your spouse, and some of you don't even know them anymore. Are you mature enough to handle their answers? Ask yourself, do you actually want your spouse to be honest with you? Do you invite their opinion and feelings and hurts? Or would you rather hide and avoid the issues in your marriage? Because I'm simply telling you, avoiding conflict at all costs, telling her stop making a big deal about things, doesn't protect your closeness, it kills it. I can tell you why 50% of marriages fail. Because they aren't filled with two people who do the work. They aren't filled with two people who ask these questions and prioritize affection and make time for each other. They aren't filled with two people who know each other's love language and have a desire to execute it consistently. They aren't filled with two people who admire each other and appreciate each other and care about each other's needs and desires. They aren't filled with two people who are intentional about complimenting more than they're complaining. Two people who have an attitude of gratitude. They aren't filled with two people who want to prepare for how they're going to handle conflict ahead of time instead of just defaulting to destructive and toxic habits like everyone else. They aren't filled with two people who invite and encourage their partner's feelings and hurts and desires, even if it's a complaint against them. They aren't filled with two people who help each other with the stressors and struggles and burdens in both of their lives. They aren't filled with two people who pursue selflessness and compromise and friendship and consideration, not perfectly, just purposefully. My goal isn't that you always feel like you're not doing enough. This isn't about shame or blame or perfection or me calling you a failure. This is about us showing up for our spouse in the way that we promised them. One person won't cut it. You can stay married even though only one person is putting in the work, but it won't thrive. You will never grow closer to that person. You will only increase the distance and disconnection. You might have a marriage certificate, but you don't have a relationship. So my advice, have a desire to find out what you don't know. Have a desire to put in the work in your relationship. Have the courage to be held accountable and ask other people to help you see any blind spots that you might be missing that can absolutely set you up to fail instead of succeed. Can you imagine ever asking someone that? Because your marriage is worth that. And everything worthwhile requires effort and intentionality and work, doesn't it? And when you're consistently putting in the work, when it becomes a habit, just like anything else, just like running or building muscle or losing weight or learning a new skill, of course it's hard in the beginning. But two things happen as you continue that habit. It gets easier and you start to see the rewards, don't you? And it's the same for your relationships. The best relationships front end the work in the beginning, when you still liked each other. Remember those days? That's the best time to build a strong foundation of a relationship that can actually survive the storms. Because the storms are coming, and the time to prepare for them isn't when you're in the middle of them. The reason so many marriages fail is because they are superficial and nobody realizes it. They don't have depth or strength to them. Because your relationship is only strong as you are. And men, I'm not talking about physical strength. I'm talking about emotional strength. I'm talking about trust and emotional safety and affection and prioritizing her love language consistently, religiously, not out of fear or begrudging obligation, but out of love and honor and because we value her. And most of us have never even asked the question, how strong is my relationship really? I mean, I know how strong I think it is, but am I actually putting in the work, or am I setting myself up to fail in this marriage? And if you put in the work consistently, it's not a burden, it's not a chore, it's an investment into something wonderful that not everyone has, because everyone says they want a marriage filled with friendship and connection and passion, but few learn the work necessary to achieve one, because only certain paths lead to those destinations. The only question is, are you on one? Criticism and shaming them doesn't lead there. Emotional avoidance and relational laziness never lead there either. Mocking them, dismissing them, demeaning them, controlling them, manipulating them, invalidating them over and over in your conflicts never leads there. Men, an attitude of entitlement or selfishness or pride never gets you more sex and less fighting. So stop pretending like they do. Stop thinking you can practice any of those in your relationship and it be fine. It won't. Do the work of eliminating destructive and toxic behaviors and replacing them with healthy ones that actually lead to closeness and connection and trust. And then you will have the marriage you both want and deserve. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next one. Also, I decided to donate $5 every time I said the word work. How did I do? Okay, that's definitely going to hurt the wallet. All right. Is anyone open to Venmoing me any money? I got it. No, don't worry about it. I got it.